today we encounter a very difficult lessons. And Mal just assigned me to preach for this Sunday. Thank you. Well, but are we supposed to, or should we, or could we learn something from dishonest person who does stuff like squandering? When his ill behavior was exposed and now given a notice of termination from his job, what does this man do? Well, I guess the repentance was not his choice. Selfishly, he thought for himself. He was like, no, I can't do any physical labor, or no, I don't want to beg. If it was me, my mother would have said, you are the one who made that mess. You do whatever it takes. But, well, out of desperation, that manager quickly call his employers, debtors, tell them to bring their bills, and one by one, he tells them to reduce the amount that they owe. The official contracts, he is twisting it so that he will look good to them. Possibly one of them will give him a job after he officially gets fired. And he does all of that without permission of his boss. And the parable continues. His master finds out what that manager did. Well, soon to be a former manager, right? You would think he would be so mad, wouldn't you? No, his master praised this dishonest behavior as a shrewd act. What? And then Jesus says, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Jesus is not surely condoning dishonesty, is he? This parable is very confusing. You know, last week I preached on the parables of the lost sheep and the lost coins at my home parish in Granbury. And I think that sermon, it went really well. I mean, the message of those parables are sort of straightforward and very heartwarming. So you know what? Would you mind if I change the sermon and just preach from last week? I think I can find that sermon somewhere. I know it's in there. Let me see. I mean, this week's parable is just way too hard for the simple seminarian like me. But yeah, okay, that's a joke. Yeah, but well, yes, this is the parable after all. What is parable anyway? A parable is a short, simple story that uses everyday situation to display deeper spiritual or moral stories. So, in other words, to truly comprehend this story, we need to understand what ordinary life, everyday situation was like in the first century in the land of Israel. In our present context, we often interpret the manager in this parable as dishonest, one who, after being dismissed from his position, sought to secure his own future by reducing the debts of others, hoping they might later give him a job. I mean, he cheats the master by squandering first, and he cheats him again by reducing the debts behind his back. But the Middle Eastern New Testament studies scholar Kenneth Bailey interprets this parable slightly differently by using the first century cultural and societal Middle Eastern lens through the notion of honor, shame, and public perception. He writes that honor was the most valuable commodity, even more than wealth. And shame was not just personal embarrassment, but a loss of standing in the eyes of the community. He does not deny that his manager was dishonest at his job, but Bailey analyzed what the manager did during that time between the notice of the termination and the actual termination. We will never know how long it really was. Weeks, maybe just days. Well, remember, this is parable, so. But Bailey reaches the conclusion that what he did was not only shrewd, but also merciful. The manager told the first debtor who owed 100 jugs of the olive oil to change the bill to 50. In reality, the manager was perhaps inflating the amount of the debt, so it was likely 50 jugs that the debtor actually owed after all. The manager added that other 50 for his own benefit. Again, no one is denying that his action was dishonest. But the manager, after the notice of termination, he had a choice to do nothing and keep the money of that extra 50 jugs and put that money in his pocket. But he chose to lose his profit rather than squeeze the debtors. Bailey continues to explain that when the manager reduced the debts, it was not private bookkeeping trick, but a public performance that instantly raised the master's honor, and that manager's action made his master look generous. And also, this last point that I'm about to tell, I found it very interesting that Bailey states, by lowering the debts of the master, relieved the real economic pressure on peasants who owe large sums of oil. I mean, peasants are not mentioned at all in this parable at all, but there weren't any machinery like today who produce the oil easily. Someone had to do that harsh physical labor to produce those oils. To me, it is ironic. If this manager was an honest man and worked with integrity, presumably he would have stayed at job for a long time. But because of his dishonest behavior, well, sin, he was in a way forced to realize the concept of limited time, an eschatological idea of the end of time. I don't know, somehow the phrase from Amazing Grace, was blind, but now I see, that comes to my mind. Again, we don't know how long the limited time was for this dishonest manager. Weeks, days, could be just hours. However long it was, he chose to do something good, merciful, and righteous during that limited time. This resonates personally with me on my own discernment journey to be a priest. I don't mean to imply that my discernment is, as righteous, and that sounds a little arrogant, but what I mean is that the awareness of limited time nudged me to pursue this vocation. I actually contemplated priesthood when I was in my early 30s, but I never pursued that further at that time. It just wasn't the right time for me. Some of you may know that I used to teach music before I started seminary education. It was a stable and comfortable life. When I told my former colleagues about my decision to leave the job and start seminary, and of course, many of them are very supportive of my decision with a tiny flare of, have you lost your mind? But now I am in my older than 30s. I am more keenly aware of the limitedness of my time, and I want to use it wisely and urgently. It is like when you are on the week-long wonderful vacation. You treasure every moment, especially the time at the end, because you know you can't stay there forever. Or music, or any forms of performing arts, like theater, musical, dance, or even stand-up comedy. All performing arts are based on the context of limited time frames, that it has the end. And because of that, you can feel the intensity and urgency during that performance. Yes, especially for those who have participated in performing arts, you know that it could induce fear and anxiety, like stage fright, but it also provides us joy as well. It all depends on our intention, desire, devotion, purpose, the orientation of our hearts toward God within that limited time. Amen.